Hello and welcome to Megan's Mystical Mashup, a conversation about life, the universe, and anything in between. My name is Megan Rounds, and welcome to the show. This is the second appearance of today's guest, who lives in Georgia with her wife, 10-year-old son, and 13-year-old daughter. She joined the Lightworkers Lab 3 years ago, and since then has become a moderator in the main lab and co-teacher of the Psychic Development Circle, also known as the PDC. She's an archangel reader, healer, and direct speech channel. She's come a long way from her early career days as an avionics technician in the United States Air Force, and her experience in fitness and health program management and coaching, to self-employment as owner of Soulful Transformations, which focuses on spiritual, emotional, and intuitive intelligent design. Members of the lab may have heard of her program, Body of Light, which I have personally participated in and highly recommend. Please give a warm Lightworker welcome to Lauren Antuofermo. I'm going to accept her invitation to be on the show. While she comes on the show, I'm going to add her details here. She does have a new Body of Light program opening up in March, I believe, and so I've included a link to where that will become available once once she opens up the order shopping cart. There we go. Hopefully you can see that because my live feed on the oh, there it is. I'm just going to do this quickly before my whole feed had stopped and I wasn't able to see any comments. So hi, Lauren.
Hi, Megan. Can you hear me?
I can hear you really well. Yes.
Okay, good. I didn't know if...
Can you hear me okay? I turned my headphones up. Okay. All right. Awesome. So hi, and welcome back to the show. It's so awesome to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you. Can I tell you, I love the way you start the show, like with all your little tidbits. So interesting. I love it.
Well, thank you. I was thinking originally, people join, within the first maybe 15 minutes, we get a fair amount of people joining. So I don't want them to miss the conversation. So it's like, what can I put in there to make it interesting for those who are there, but where people don't feel like they completely missed things.
No, I love it.
Well, thank you. That's really helpful to hear. It's fun to look those things up, and it always puts me in such a good mood.
Yeah.
Well, so I'm going to start with the easiest thing ever. And how is the weather there? You're in Georgia, and you get all of the stuff that we did have, but I heard that the weather's supposed to get better there, and it's supposed to get up to the 40s here, so it's almost 100. It's like a 90 or 80 degree temperatures from like Wednesday.
Yes, down in the 30s here, which is really cold for us here in Georgia, and I was actually enjoying it because I'm originally from New York, so I was like, oh, I miss the cold. I wish it would snow, but it's not going to snow here in middle Georgia. But it's going to get like up to 72 by Tuesday, I think.
Oh,
yeah.
Lucky. Ooh.
Yeah.
We're going back below zero, but at least we got a little glimpse of spring. So, that can, everybody's mood, like last night I went out with a friend and everybody's mood was just, everybody was happy and smiling and
yeah, it's amazing what the weather can do.
Oh my gosh. So Lauren and I, for those of you listening, had talked yesterday to do a tech test, as we do. And we came up with a couple of ideas for things that we can talk about today, but it'll also be a pretty organic conversation, I think, anyway. But because this is Lauren's second appearance, we've already gone through the spiritual journey and all of those things, and I will post a link to that, the replay of that first conversation in the show notes. So you can watch that if you missed it the first time around. Okay, so we had talked about a couple of different things, but before I go into any particular topic, I just want to see if if there's anything top of mind that you'd like to bring up.
Not really. I was thinking about, doing a lot of like the symbols that you were talking about like the energy and all the stars and the black holes. I was like, oh, this is my gig. This is my stuff. So I really love that you opened up with that. And I was like, oh, that stardust type of energy, the light that reaches us from, like eons or ages away from us. Like that's really powerful stuff. And I think it's something that could be talked about as well. But because I'm into astrology and the way the stars and all of the elements come together to just create our reality. It's really impressive to me. So,
Well, I
yeah.
love that. And I have to, I pulled that story up a few weeks ago and I held it, even though I'd had a couple of other mashups. I just held it because it just didn't feel like the right time. And this time it's like, because I'm like, I have all this stuff to read. Should I even go there? And it's like, yes, you will. It's like, you will read this.
Yeah.
So,
And then you brought the sunshine card up, which was really, indicative of how light is the way that we create. So even when there's like darkness or that whole separation of light, the separating the light from the dark was just a space to create something new in. And I feel like that's where I get all of my inspiration from, knowing that the energy where there's lack is really just a space to create something new in.
I love that. It's such a great way to look at it because, when feeling in the dark, and I have to say this particular winter has hit me really hard that way. Usually I just haven't gone as dark as I have this year. And, there's all kinds of things that I could use to explain it, but ultimately I think it's a transformative experience as long as I can embrace it as that instead of criticizing it and getting down on myself for, why can't I just pull myself out of it? And so when I get into that mindset of this is something that's necessary in order to transform, in order to evolve, it really helps my mindset. And that whole space to create is just such a wonderful way to look at it and a positive way to look at it. So thank you for saying it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Well, one of the things we were talking about yesterday was health and well-being, and I wonder if this would be a good segue for that.
Oh, interesting. Because when you're explaining that like dark period or that overwhelming period of kind of what we would describe as shadow, right? When we're in the light, but something blocks it, then you can see that as, anything related to like fear or pain or worry or frustration in that space of lack, in that space of the void. And like or really like that void creates a feeling of worry or stress or overwhelm. And that's where we get the inspiration to grow or to move into a new awakening, a new awareness. So anytime that we have that feeling of lack in the space where we're trying to concentrate on something, and like well-being, for example, like fitness and well-being, that was my career a lot of the times. And when I went through periods of deep, like darkness or frustration or overwhelm or confusion, my health and my well-being really suffered at that time. And so that's when I started to create this like body of light program that, you were part of, where the alignment of our awareness or our emotional energy allows us to like seek something new. Because when we're in fear, it's hard because we're not trying to get into a better frequency. We're trying to avoid something painful. But when we're in pain, we usually have that choice to say, okay, what's the better thing? What's the next? And in a lot of that like darkness period that that I went through, there was a lot of fear-based awareness of myself. I'm not doing good enough. I'm not happy. I'm not having the experience I should be having. All of those types of things. Well, like inwardly suffering like that emotion without exploring it, without examining it, without coming to compassion for it, put my body in a very low energy place. So the way that I explained that through, the body of light program was how the body actually increases awareness as we open up our third eye, as we open up our spiritual connection. And that means that it has to operate from a higher level of consciousness. But when we have fear about our body's health and well-being, when we have judgments about our body's health and well-being, when we're constantly afraid of what might be going wrong, the body doesn't, connect with that higher self-awareness, with that openness to increase the light energy in our physical forms. So when we get to that place and we're going, why is my health suffering? I'm opening to source. I'm opening to light. Now I'm more sensitive. My body's overwhelming me. I feel lack. I feel pain. What the heck is going on? A lot of it was judgment, was self-judgment of where I should be and what I should be doing. in the experience of opening up to my spiritual journey, there was all this love and light and wow. And then criticizing every human aspect of myself of not being aligned to that wound up really, you know, decreasing my physiology, my energy of accepting more of that potential light, you know?
Yeah.
So I went through a lot of pain in my body, both both spiritually related and physically related. I had a lot of pain in my hips, a lot of pain in my and like my musculature was very tense a lot of the times, giving me headaches. So a lot of that I had to go past judgment into asking what I needed. And as I grew in that compassion, like regardless of what my emotions were, instead of like joining in the, oh, I should only feel good. I should only feel happy. And when I had a negative emotion, judging it, oh, I'm not in alignment. I'm wrong for being in this place. That's where that real deep discord in my body happened. And I went from, you know, spiritual awareness to judging myself a lot in that like higher self-awareness. You go, oh, well, my human self is nowhere near my higher self-awareness. So I got to compare, I got to judge, I got to fix, I got to get rid of, I got to let go. But all of that did was kind of like keep me from enjoying where I was and just evaluating life from the lessons I was getting from my spiritual journey, if that makes sense.
I think so.
And yeah.
I mean, what?
Okay.
Oh, go ahead.
No, sorry. Go ahead.
No, you go.
Okay. Because what I want to say as far as health and well-being was that like when I valued my energy in physical fitness, right? And I was a trainer, I was a lead exercise physiologist in one of the highest commands in the United States military. I was really good. I was fit. I was happy. I was doing well. And then I went on my spiritual journey. My spiritual journey took me to places of awakening my intuition, my channeling ability, my connection to source and Gaia and angels and spirit guides and past loved ones. And all of that felt so much bigger than my little human self that I started to judge everything about my human self. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And that was like, oh, this almost spiritual perfectionist attitude that I brought into my own physical consciousness. And I couldn't really thrive from there because everything was judged, was negative, was powerless in the fear that I was doing something wrong or I wasn't being as good as I should be. And so that idea really took me away from my physical orientation of just enjoying being human to feeling like this overwhelming feeling of spiritual knowledge should put me on this higher path where I don't judge anything, I don't feel bad about anything, I just am neutral about everything, and I shouldn't have feelings of negativity towards anyone or anything. But that's kind of where I went south, because when I didn't listen to my intuitive energy of my emotions, I couldn't complete cycles of fear or pain because I was judging them as wrong instead of seeing what was needed for my human self. So all of that to say, like, here I was in this spiritual light energy, abundance, love, joy. You go on that journey of spiritually opening up to all the information that's there and you go, oh, wow, this is what's possible. But this is where I am. Wow, you're failing. You're not doing right. You gotta heal, you gotta fix, you gotta change, you gotta concentrate all of your energy only in light. Otherwise, you're a bad person or you're not a good light worker. So that's where my body really started to shift and change from this really healthy place of enjoying my body's wellness and fitness and health to wondering like, what the heck was going on? So it took a lot of cycles for me to really heal those panic modes and fear-based thoughts that would come in. As I opened up my spiritual chakras, my body was going, but what about us? What about the body's light? Human experiment. What about what you're supposed to be doing here? What about you caring about yourself? And it was less like fortunate for me to like go through this myself so that I could put that into words and speak that truth to keep people from really judging themselves when they open up to spirit, to welcoming just more compassion for who they are and what they wanted to do here and become here. And that means having negative emotions so we can determine what's for us and what's not. and not judging it as if it's some kind of sin or bad thing that means we're unhealed. So negative emotion really started to become something of a powerful attention to source rather than a negative attention to source. It's only when I judged it, removed it, rejected it, or felt bad about it that it didn't do the job of alerting me to what I needed to know about myself. So when I started to shift that and acknowledge myself, my body's health started to improve. So right now I'm in this arrangement with Source, who are giving me like tips and healing energies to get back to that sense of fitness and fun and joy for my body, rather than the judgment of what happens when I'm not in alignment the way I think I'm supposed to be, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, I'm getting, okay, yes, granted it may be cold, but I'm getting a lot of chills from what you're talking about. These are truth chills for sure. You know, one of the things that came to me when you were talking, so a couple of things is that maybe there's like I so relate to what you're saying about starting out in your career, enjoying it, being, you know, aligned in many ways with it. And I was like that in my career as well. And then my spiritual journey started. And then I had a similar path, let's say, for me. It's like all of a sudden, I mean, for me, it was maybe a little different in that school was the bridge for me. And so that's where my spiritual journey started, was an experience while I was in school, but I still had my professional career going on. And then it kind of lost its luster quickly. And so I stepped out to do my own stuff. But even then it was like, I was so consumed by the shoulds. I should be this, I should be that. And I had this, put a lot of pressure on myself to excel at something that was so abstract that, you know, it hindered for years. Yeah. And so one of the things that I wrote down was maybe there's like a veil, you know, so you're living your life in the physical realm, and then all of a sudden there's a spiritual connection that wasn't necessarily, it may have always been there, but we weren't aware of it. And that there's like a veil that starts to leave. But sometimes we want it to happen faster, and sometimes we don't recognize that there is a veil. And then the other thing I had mentioned was, well, it almost feels to me like a purge. And so I'm kind of skipping gears a little bit, but that didn't make it changing gears, switching gears. There we go. I always mix metaphors almost as for fun.
I do that too.
And then it's like, what was the original supposed to be? I don't know. But that it feels a bit like a purge. This year in particular has felt like a purge, because the way I look at learning is that it's like a spiral, and we're starting at the outside of the spiral. There's some idea, some nugget, and then we go down into kind of a lower, maybe it's actually, now I'm rethinking my whole theory, but it's like you start with something and you feel high into the knowledge, into the experience, and then you kind of go into a dark point where it's like, I don't really know if I know what I'm talking about. What does this really mean in terms of my life? Well, for me, that spiral for me feels like it's getting bigger, but that it has more profound effect. So this year, it does feel like I am purging a lot of limiting beliefs, those beliefs around judgment and should, and how that all came to be for me in the first place, but also around, if I want to live a different life than what I have right now, in whatever way, shape, or form that happens to be, then I have to be willing to release all of those things that have kept me where I have been, if that makes sense. Right. And this year being, I seriously don't know if I have gone as far into shadow as I did this winter. I mean, it's only February, but you know, it feels like we're on the other side. At least it feels to me like I'm on the other side. And
well, this year is supposed to be that. It's supposed to be that. The last year we had so many cycles of change and shift and inward focus, just due to the amount of huge, even astrology can point out, with all of the inward motion of the planets that happened last year in big ways. I mean, we had periods of time where most planets were in retrograde, which means most people were inwardly purging that which doesn't align to that higher perspective of themselves. And so that can be where we struggle the most, because we're going, wait a minute, this belief isn't serving me. I'm doing this and it doesn't feel good, but I'm not sure which direction to go in. And so we try to like purge these things. But when the planet goes direct again, it's almost like the new light on the new path shows up in where we want to be going. So, but it was first that inner acknowledgement of where am I wanting to go versus what's being like purged is the fear that we're not worthy of moving forward. You know,
Yes.
it's that fear-based energy of worthiness that I think that most of us struggle with of, am I worthy to be here as I am today? Am I worthy to just be who I am in this moment? Guilt, shame, and hostility are those feelings that result from self-denial and self-judgment about a lot of things. But those things begin to purge themselves once we ask for what is needed. Right? And so when we internally evaluate our thoughts and our belief systems, we're asking to receive something that has been kept from us due to fear of worthiness or not enoughness.
Yeah.
So when you say I had to release a lot of stuff, I see it as you were receiving what you needed to understand about yourself so you can let go of those limiting beliefs. And so I always try to like push it more towards the receiving end, because once we understand that we're worthy of the receiving of what we need to move past any obstacles, to move past any fear-based guilt, pain, or shame things that we might have had stuck in our memories, in our cellular memories, those types of things emerge once we begin to awaken, because now we're asking for the light to hold us in love for what we want to heal, rather than what we need to criticize or reject about ourselves. So we're always asking for something more. That's just the human experiment, right? But it's never about greed. It's about receiving the light that we wish to promote.
That is, more chills coming through for me. For me, it speaks to what you're saying so clearly. I've been trying to figure out what's next for me. What am I passionate about? What do I really want to do? And I received some pretty profound messages that are like,
girl, when you were talking just now, I was like, ooh, she's on a path to good stuff. Like big, like all I saw was like big things for you over the next year and 2 years. Yep.
Awesome.
Okay.
Good. Well, that's
Happy
nice
to
and
see that.
confirming. Yay. Thank you. But and that's the thing. It feels big, and there's a lot of uncertainty around the details. And although I'm not always a detailed person, and I totally understand how people react to uncertainty, I have been reacting to uncertainty in part because I'm in partnership with somebody else in terms of, being married to him. And he doesn't get this stuff. So how am I supposed to explain? I got a message from, source, that I'm to do these things that are very energetically focused. And then I have to let go of giving a crap because about what he or anyone else thinks, because this is my purpose. This is my path forward, and I own it. And once I made the conscious choice to, one, hear that message, which I think has been coming through for a while. I just wasn't able to receive. I wasn't ready to receive. I had to let go of all that other crap. I saw you shift your eyes, so now I want to hear what came to you. But but once that happened, I started creating a new definition of who I am and who the person I'm moving towards, because I may not have completely filled that space yet, but I have a direction that I didn't feel I had before, and it's given me a new sense of purpose, which is something I felt I was lacking before. And so all of that comes around receiving, and my ability and my willingness to ask and listen, and then to make meaning from it, to really translate it for me in a way. I mean, I got a really big message, but because it didn't have details, it's like, okay, what does that mean? And now it's like, okay, well, I'm going to keep asking. I'm going to keep channel writing this stuff because it helps me to add that definition. And it helps me to create a new way of being that I never had before. So I feel like now I'm rambling, but I just want to say that really connected with me. So yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. It feels like there's a new like plan when we start to awaken. There's a new idea of what source intends for that kind of consciousness. So sometimes we're not in the awakened state, right? We're in human state, we're in the human mind where we're concentrating on need, um, you know, resolving issues between family members and communicating things that we need to grow from just from the human, physiology point as well. The human body also ascends. The human body also creates more light energy. So, sticking with that plan of talking about wellness and wealth even, the point of attraction for the physical body also erupts into something new when we start to give it more alignment, more love, more joy, more compassion. And that means like even the physiology of our cells shift to increase their awareness of source. And when we do that, we ask our bodies to come along for the ride. It's not so much a mind meld with source, it's a whole entire frequency shift of the physiology of our bodies. And that's where we kind of go south. Like, all right, here I am in this mindset of source being connected to me. Now I have to, force my body to come along. I have to fix it. I have to change it. I have to, resolve to only take in the highest, foods and energy ever. And if I eat anything out of alignment with that, it means my body's going to be rejecting it and going into, fear-based mode. Some of the things that I'm eating are not the highest frequency, but when I bring my attention to them, they bring more light to them. So recently, for example, I was eating a steak, and this steak wasn't farmed from like the most compassionate place. So Spirit told me, when you give the enjoyment of this information, when you give the enjoyment of what you're eating to the animal that rests in love for what it wants to offer the world, you give the spiritual alignment a better connection, and you allow the body to increase its absorption of the nutrients of any food, really. Because when you give thanks for that food, you're communicating with the highest frequencies for your intention for it. And food is no different relationships than begging for money doesn't work, right? Unless you're really in need and somehow somebody feels, the urge to give. But most of the time when you want to attract something, you're asking for the highest energy to be connected to you. The same goes with our health and well-being. So although I would not recommend eating a diet of, forced sweets every day, all day, just to see if it works, I would say being in communication with the food you're eating allows us to choose the foods that are better for us. And we stop trying to eat foods from a fear-based place or a lack-based place or a guilt place and start choosing the foods that will help the earth recover and connect with us in a more positive way. So the first part of what they're teaching me is connecting to food groups as an awareness to loving the body, loving the source that it comes from, regardless of where it comes from right now. Because the more we send love to what we have, the less fear and reality-based neglect of these animals will happen. Because even when we send love to the foods that we are, creating within ourselves, these foods become less fear-based, and people want more of what the best of Earth has to offer. And so that desire changes the methodology of people using, the food industry has to respond to the desire of the people. So once we all start to really complement the idea of food being good for us and starting to thank it, even when it's not sourced from the highest places, we will change the frequency by which these things come about. And that's the energetic awareness of it. So even right now, when I go, oh crap, I'm not eating the best foods right now, I'm not getting my meat sourced from the best places on earth where these animals are treated respectfully and lovingly, I still go into the feeling of thanks and honoring it, because what they're saying is that it brings value to the spiritual incarnation of that animal. and allows that energy to infiltrate into the world so that people start really ascending and treating our animals better. Even when it's not like, so in every little thing that we do and appreciate, something higher must come from it. So that's kind of where I'm going next with my food. But to honor what you were saying as far as, including the awareness of what needs to shift, the shift happens as we acknowledge the love for what we want to receive. And that becomes a bigger draw. It becomes a bigger, higher intention that collectively could become big changes rather than waiting for the industry to change. We change and the industry changes for us.
I just love this. There are things that struck me. One, I wrote down like a chicken and an egg mentality around how if we believe our body, we have to change things in order to alleviate the body, and we're doing it on the physical level, then it seems like it's an upward or uphill battle in a way. I did resonate with what you said earlier about all the physical sensations and things like that. I've had a lot of those over the past couple of months that have created fear because, it's like, is this age-based? It's like all of a sudden I just started freaking out. Like I've always been very mobile and all of a sudden I felt like I couldn't be as mobile, and the energy level of me physically has changed over the course of this winter. And it's like, is this my new normal? Oh, hell no. This isn't going to work for me. And so all that fear that you were talking about before definitely came in because and some of it's still here and I'm trying to allow that. Yeah. but I think also it connects to what you were saying around, the body has to adapt to this new energetic frequency. And I've gotten so many messages over the past couple of weeks to slow down and be kind and allow myself this time. Yet it conflicts with external messages of I've got to get my crap together and, pound the pavement and bring in some moolah and all of the things that can invoke major fear, right? Survival kind of things. And it's like, oh, wow, that's a really interesting conflict. But that's where the chicken and egg thing comes in, I think, because it's like, if I can look at it from this is a part of me adapting to this new way that I want to be. And I've been fighting it, which is why I think I've had these physical experiences instead of allowing it and being kind, like all those messages have been time and again telling me, and not make excuses for it, which I think it's like, yeah, but, and it's like, no, just, hear it and allow it and be okay. It seems like that's an easier, smoother transition than fighting it tooth and nail and being afraid of what's going on physically. I'll just stop at that.
And you ain't saying nothing. I haven't been through or still go through. Woo. So that's why they're telling me to do this right now. They're telling me to take this time to adjust my energy about what I eat, when I eat, so that as I become comfortable with the ease and not the worry and not the fear and not the overwhelm of, oh God, I'm not eating what I'm supposed to be eating. I'm going to gain weight. I'm not going to gain weight. I'm going to feel fear about what I'm eating until I make myself change it. And I'm just going to criticize what I'm doing until I get to the point where the criticism makes me change. And then, that kind of critical change doesn't really last for very long. It doesn't really, connect with a quick kind of result. So we can force the change for sure, but what they're trying to teach me is that through alignment with the foods I'm eating now, I will start to become joyful for the foods that really resonate with my body. And then maybe I'll go vegan, who knows? Yeah. But the idea is that as I comfort myself about what I'm doing, the desire for better choices comes easier, and I start to choose them with less fear, with less critical energy. And I found that when I healed my sciatic pain, a lot of it was, I'm a physical trainer. I'm an exercise physiologist. I am a teacher of alignment and love. How am I in this pain right now? Like, whoa, that was a big ego. Oh, God. I mean, tell you what, dealing with that ego and then still want to be in the presence of mind to teach from love and being in love, and then going back into the fear and the rejection of self, like that was a trip. But when I finally took time to do exactly what your guides are telling you to do, to just release the frustration and the overwhelm of everything that I was being inspired to look after, to connect to do, and to create. After I let the fear of what I needed to do for that to happen go, and I took time to myself, it was literally within 2 week span that I healed an 8-month horrific sciatic pain. I mean, there were days I could not stand, I could not sit, and I could not lay down for more than 20 minutes without needing to change positions.
Oh, wow.
And there were times where I'd be in bed all day, not being able to move because of this condition. And there were times during that 8 months where I would heal and get a little better. But whatever it was that kept me in fear, that would rise again, would immediately attack that energy, because I was afraid, listen to this, I was afraid that if I went into frustration or overwhelm, that my body would react in pain. So I started to associate negative emotion with pain. And it was almost like immediate after that. And it wasn't until I finally let go of needing to fix myself that I fixed myself. That I let the joy of just being where I was and tuning to what I needed first and foremost, that it finally healed. And I have never had it again, ever. I have had tightness in there, but not so much to the point where I'm in uncompromising pain.
Well, that's amazing. And it really speaks to that concept of letting go of those things that, those beliefs, those nagging, whether it's voices or, well, it can be, or mirroring from other people, and being able to release that. I've been fascinated about the concept of letting go, because there are so many times we hear, just let it go. And it's like, well, if you're a control freak, which I have been known to be, it's like, that's a foreign concept. That's it.
Well, the paradox to that is, like, as soon as you try to let go, you're not letting go.
Yeah. It's like you're holding on even tighter in a way, just by it's like, why can't I let it go?
Yeah, because, and so I think that's why I always go to that feeling of compassion for what is needed, because when you pay attention to that, you're not trying to let it go. You're allowing it to be without judgment of it. And that's when it let itself go.
Yes. So I just wanted to also mention what you were saying about being attentive and thankful to the food. Taking the time, what ran through my mind is that it almost requires slowing down. If like, my family, we'll eat at the table, but my husband eats really fast. And now my daughter is like, I won, feeling like she's accomplished something by eating even faster than him. And then it takes me like twice as long to eat anything. Now, I was in the Navy and we only had 15 minutes to eat during boot camp. So I learned how to eat fast and disregard all of it. Yeah. So it's like, and it's like, well, that's a schedule-based thing, but boy, what kind of and I know my daughter at school has like 15 or 20 minutes to eat, and I'm like, what is that?
It's terrible what they do at school. Yeah,
and
it really is.
It teaches a total disregard to attention and presence when eating. And so I have tried to be mindful about being, taking time to do some thanks, but I forget all the time.
Yeah.
And especially if I'm eating out with a friend or something, we're having a conversation. Like last night we had a couple, like Brussels sprouts and French fries. It's a really weird combination. Really, really good.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, it worked. But it's like, I wasn't paying attention. I paid attention to the flavor of the food, but I wasn't at the point where I went deeper to thank all of the things that went into preparing that, where that food was sourced, all of the things that went into growing it and all of that. And, that does takes intention and routine. You may not be at this place yet, but do you have tips on how to make that shift more sustainable?
with being present.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that what happens when we begin to slow down is that the feeling that we're not getting something done encroaches on the light we could be experimenting with at that time. The feeling of I'm not accomplishing something. I'm not worried about why I'm not eating quickly, but I'm going, all right, what do I need to do in this moment? What do I have to do correctly to be present? Like still that inner critic comes across.
Yeah.
And so the ways that I've included that presence in my life is just knowing that even if that happens, it's an improvement on ignoring the now moment. Because if I accept that my mind wants to get away from being present because it feels like if I stay still, then I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing. If I stay still, then maybe I'm not doing the right thing. It like almost overshadows the moment that you're asking for because it's so used to being in the driver's seat.
Yes.
It's so used to being in the driver's seat that we've lived from that panic mode most of our lives. I have to feel better than I do right now. I have to do better than I'm doing right now. I have to know more than I know right now. I have to get to where I need to go in order for me to be relaxed. But the paradox of that is that every moment that you're not where you want to be, you're in fear of not being there. So it keeps it from you. And so the point of attraction for that is, yeah, mindfulness. But how do you get there when the mind is so powerful in that pattern, right? And it's less like we have to control the mind, which I disagree with a lot of people who say we have to control the mind. We have to allow it to be like a child. Okay, I hear you. I see you. I can see that it's starting to have an emotion within me. And that emotion is exactly why this belief doesn't serve me. So when we try to get away from the emotion by doing, we're getting away from the very thing telling us why it is we're not able to sit in love, sit in joy, or sit in awareness of what we need. So it's the emotion that allows us to sit in discomfort and acknowledge what is needed. And when we ask what is needed, usually the answer comes right away. Well, I need to just learn to love myself. And that can be very critically important to acknowledge. And for me, that is the most awakened person. The person that can acknowledge that they deserve the love that they're asking for. And that is where people stop trying to covet what they want and they start designing their life. I'm powerfully choosing to learn that right now. I'm not all the way in that awareness or that awakened state all the time, but there are moments that I have about that feels like magic. And for that, I'm willing to give up the fear of not being where I am right now.
I just absolutely love what you said. You know, it's just walking backwards, appreciating the moments and allowing ourselves to wobble is a bit, you know, I don't know if all cultures are like this, but certainly in America, it's supposed to be you get it. I mean, you don't get it, and then all of a sudden you do get it, and there's no anything in between. You're just supposed to get it. And then when you don't get it automatically, or when it's not sustainable right away, we beat up on ourselves. And so, you know, and that goes along with the perfectionism and all of that other stuff. I also had written down fear of missing out, which I kind of think of as what we're not doing when we're doing this. It could be anything. Right. It's not just fear of missing out of what other people are doing. It's what we could be doing. Yeah. And that whole busyness mentality. It was quite a while ago that I recognized the difference between true productivity and busyness. And that busyness was kind of like this, kind of like a film over everything. And, you know, I can't do this, I'm too busy. And it's like, what do you know, I mean, and in a work environment, it was like there are people who are constantly busy and really stressed about it. They never really seemed to hit their mark of whatever it was.
Yes.
And and even though I recognized it, it's like I can tell when I'm doing the busy work, and it's almost like a weird coping mechanism. I shouldn't label it weird, but for me, it felt like a weird coping mechanism. It's like, I'm just going to do all this stuff that doesn't really have any impact on anything instead of doing the stuff that really matters. And anyway, and the stuff that really matters, just like the food stuff, has been things where I've had to slow down, where it's been important for me to be present and engaged. And even though from a work standpoint, that hasn't always been presence within my body, more and more that is where I'm going. Because I'm starting to, even though I'm not going to say it because it sounds judgmental about me, and this is that whole part about self-love. It's like, okay, so for me, it felt like there are a lot of people who are really attuned to what's taking place in their body, and I have, until really recently, and your program is where that door opened for me. But until recently, I haven't spent that much time really recognizing all of the things that my body is trying to tell me here and there. And just recognizing these things has been life-changing in a huge way. But before then, it was like I'm always up here, and it's like my presence is never really my default presence is outside of my body. So it's like relearning a new way of being.
That's exactly what we were just talking about. Like at the beginning, like it was that awareness of the incoming light through the conscious mind, but the body not being invited along for the ride.
Yes.
And judging the human experience, which is really what most of us are trying to encompass. By increasing our light quotient in our bodies, we become less fearful of the now moment. But that's a matter of switching the dynamic from spirituality being this hierarchical type of awareness to a powerful inclusion of our now moments, of our now connection. So when we delineate from our human minds to the spiritual mind, we're constantly judging the human energy field. And that's what keeps us separate from source.
Yep. And
so when we decipher, what things we want, what things we don't, and then we start criticizing the things that we've done wrong, we have to move from softness about it to awareness of what we want to change. But the softness has to come first, because the judgment of us, constantly fearfully judging ourselves, and not judgment in saying like judgment is not necessarily wrong depending on how you use the word, but judgment in critical negation of what we deserve or what we should have or what we can become balances the fear-based belief system. But judgment in comparison to what we want balances the love-based belief system. So judgment can be used either way. Either we're using it to create awareness of the negative belief system and trying to go from that to wellness, or we're using judgment to include the awareness of the love-based belief system, which says, this is not for me, I can choose something different. And then when you choose it, you feel better. Because it really isn't about whether or not you're non-judgmental. It's about whether or not what you're not doing correctly usually fights the solution. Doing to cause yourself pain is a complete sentence. I'm doing this and it's causing me pain is not a judgment, it's a fact. But when you go from that to how do I stop it, that's when you resist what the solution could be. And when you go into how do I fix it, you kind of like still are trying solutions, but you're still in the fear of the problem. But when you go to what do I need to connect with love for myself, then you find the solution and it comes quicker. So those are like 3 steps on the emotional journey that I've encountered on this spiritual awakening business, on this spiritual awakened path. No human being has all the answers. That's just a fact. But the answers can be general enough to allow us to come to our own conclusions,
Yes,
if that makes sense.
totally. Yep. And one of the things that I think is just a really important point is that empowering ourselves with choice. I think that to me, a part of the awakening process is recognizing our own power within our physical form, within our lifetime here on Earth, and how far away from choice, at least me personally, had become. I just was going through the motions. I was going with the flow, and really wasn't empowering myself to make my own choices. And it's really hard in a relationship to all of a sudden find that empowerment because nobody else got the memo, right? They're all like, but you used to be so easygoing. I'm like, yeah, I'm not anymore. I have preferences and I'm recognizing what those are. And I have my own opinions, my own way of thinking about things. And while I used to always take those underground and really just play with them within myself, not really share them with other people, now I am. Not because I want them to be that way, but that I want them to recognize, I guess, well, I don't really care what they think. It's me recognizing my own sovereignty. And that is such a huge, profound thing for me, even though for everybody else, everything is the same. So they're like, why are you all of a sudden different?
Just had a session in my Body of Light group, which is amazing. My Body of Light group of lab people, they are so awesome and they so get it. And we have such a good synchronicity between us. That was the lab version of the Body of Light program has been really great. But we were just talking about choice and also relationships and how when we begin to awaken and validate the truth of our hearts rather than engaging in the old systematic ways of give and take rather than expansion in the relationship, the people that want to serve us in love are still stuck in their views of what love means, of how that manifested for them. And so they get fearful of where we're going because they're not in the exact same awareness. So then they want to keep us, for comfort's sake, in the same situations, in the same projection and rejection mode. Okay, you do this for me and I accept you. You don't do this for me, I reject you. This is the kind of relationship patterns that we have on Earth right now. But when you validate that, hey, Patty, when you validate that energy, from coming from love instead of fear, then you, as the person evolving, allows yourself to be separate from their acceptance or rejection mode. And you say, I love who you are, which is why we're together. But in this dynamic of pull and take, pull and push, it's no longer working for our highest good. So I'm going to allow you to be in pain about this for a minute, because I know it's going to hurt you for me to not react to you the way you expect me to. I'm going to let you be in pain for a minute, and I'm going to honor the situation that I need to have knowing of what my needs are first, so that when you get control of why you need me to react in the same old way, you will see me happy, and I will see you as loving, and we'll see each other as just expanding in what we do together rather than fearfully aligning to that push-pull give-take energy that most of us are stuck in. Now, just to clarify that a little bit, it was important for me to understand that as well, because in my own marriage, my wife isn't the most spiritual awakened person either. She's very much in the dimness of what needs to get done, how it needs to get done, when it gets done, and even when it gets done, I have fear about what else has to be done and what might go wrong about it. And so when she's in that mode, I can't connect with her. Like, it's hard. And when I try, I get angry, and then I move to her level of anger. But there's been a big aha within our relationship or within myself to say, that's not about me. And when I let it being about me, she rests in the knowledge that I'm not judging her, and we form a better bond. So even though she's not awakening in the way that I am, there's this understanding of, I'm not going to commit perjury against myself so that you can feel comfortable in my anger with you. I'm going to allow you to have your anger without me joining you for the ride. And that usually usurps the situation to an understanding. I'm here for you, but not here to create more of what you want to sit in. And that, for a while, caused some judgment between us and some frustration. But the point wasn't that we were trying to hurt each other. We were trying to get to a better plane of relating. So it's not always perfect, but it is a lot better than constantly going to the same point of attraction of, I need you to do this for me to feel better. I need you to have that in order for me to get to where I want to go. There was all of this expectation and judgment and fear that we weren't doing enough for each other as well. Well, if she's not excited about this, then I'm not doing what I need to do. So there was a lot of judgment and projection there that once we started to stop the projection, the real truth came out about what was happening, and we started to get to a better plane of communication, which again won't happen in every relationship. Not every relationship is going to traverse that rocky plane, but it is worth a try.
That's super duper helpful for me in where I'm at with my relationship, because everything you described is what has happened, and I find myself sometimes easily triggered to go into that same place of fear, and then I get upset with myself for allowing it to happen.
Yes.
Which then it's like double judgment, right? It's like kind of judging him and judging me, and
oh my God, do we live the same lives? What's going on?
Seriously. But this morning something happened where he told me what he felt, and it was definitely something that could have triggered me, but I was already in the energy of today's show, I think, and I was just like, thank you for sharing that. I've never really heard you explain things that way before. And then I didn't do anything else. I didn't explain a different perspective or things like I typically do. I just let him be in that. And it actually it diffused the situation completely. There was no increased energy eruption kind of thing that often accompanies those types of things. And I was just like, well, that was an interesting experience. And I was really surprised that he didn't go into an attempt to make it more volatile. Instead, he was just like, oh, she heard me. And
yeah,
it was just amazing how that diffused so quickly. I want more of that.
The hardest thing as an empath, I've ever had to say to my wife was, it's not my responsibility to make you feel better about what you're projecting onto me right now. That was the hardest thing I ever had to say to her. And it was a while before that really came to an understanding. And then after that, I feel like we connect even better. But it was hard in that moment to say, I don't need to fix this.
Yeah.
This is yours to handle. And to watch her struggle with that was really painful. Probably not as painful as what she was feeling at the time, but it got us to the place of adulting, of actually talking about what we needed to talk about, rather than trying to fit each other into this mold that we expected each other to be in.
Yeah.
And it was really powerful.
I love that you put adulting, because I feel when I see my husband and daughter interact, it's really easy for me to see him get triggered and go into what he must have been like. I use 8 years old, but maybe it's 10, but he goes into this kind of little boy mode. And I am sure that I do the same thing, but it's a lot harder for me to see because I'm in it. And
yes.
When I do think about, well, where would I be going? It's like, well, maybe 12. And I wasn't adulting. I was freaking out. I was coping. I was running away a lot of the time. And I still am very challenged by that incessant urge to flee. My past was not as volatile as I'm making it sound. It was just conflict ridden in safe ways in terms of physical stuff, but it just was not something that was easy for me to manage as kind of an in-betweener between my parents and my younger sisters.
Yeah.
And so all of those
are the coping mechanisms that we develop in situations where we don't have control of the situation.
Yeah.
And we don't have the emotional language to decide for ourselves. Yeah. Most of the times our parents and our families are deciding for us what we should feel, think, and say.
Oh, yes.
And so the part of adulting really comes to the point where we stop to reject the coping mechanisms of rejection. Most of our childhood is about rejecting ourselves.
Yes.
Because, I mean, listen, it's not our parents' fault either.
No.
It's the way that we are culturally, we're meant to be validated in a way that feels good, but not given free reign to act however we want to.
Right.
So there's definitely a balance there where, parenting is hard because we got to choose in which situations do we lay down the law, in which situations do we discover what they need. There are times where we have to ignore their needs because life has to happen. And we have to say, I know that you're upset right now, but this is what's required of this situation. So it does give them a sense of maturity, but diminishing our children's feelings or telling them it's not okay to have their feelings, that's where we start to kind of reject ourselves.
Yeah. Yep. Those are significant triggers for me right now. I married someone who emulates my dad, and my dad, whether he means to or not, and he doesn't want to hear that he's like my dad. And I never set out to marry anyone like my dad, but his manner of parenting is, from my memory, exactly like my dad's was, which was all about minimizing feelings, and I have come to recognize that it's all about protection for my dad. At least he was just trying to protect me from getting hassled by other people because I was so free in showing emotion. But there were some pretty significant fallout aspects to that now when it happens between my husband and daughter.
Yeah.
Oh wow. Yeah. It's like, no, she's allowed to feel what she feels. That is her right. She has feelings. I want her to be attuned to those feelings. It doesn't.
We can definitely, teach them how not to project those feelings.
Yes.
Like that's the difference for me as far as what I've learned about being a parent is learning how to have those emotions without projecting that onto somebody else, that somebody else has to fix those emotions. Having them by equating them with love for the self. Like even when, we have emotions that are angry, those angry emotions are valued. They're validated. They're supposed to be paid attention to.
Yes.
They're just not supposed to be made somebody else's responsibility. It's the person's choice whether or not to continue engage in the situation that is making them angry.
Yeah.
And that really that gives a very strong sense of self-responsibility, rather than what the critical side of the right side of the equation says. Oh, that emotions are bad. They think they can get everything just if they whine enough, and then you got the opposite side like, no, we got to give them what they need of everything that moment. No, they got to be able to see what their emotions are asking them to do. And I think as adults learning that, it's harder. For kids, they can pick up that information very easily. But I wanted to say something that you said that was really, really powerful for me that I wanted to like piggyback on, or just crap. What did you say? Oh, that the emotions of like being as a child in the relationship really has a lot to do with the why we're there, because we get to experiment with loving each other even through those childhood emotions. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's not so bad that we have those fits of rage, but it does help us to acknowledge them in a relationship that can say, hey, this is not really what's going on. This is what the situation is. And I feel like it's a powerful thing to be able to be that vulnerable in a relationship, that you can exhibit those traits and still have compassion for one another.
Definitely. I would love to go into that further. The whole thing around vulnerability is very top of mind, but we have about 6 minutes.
Oh gosh, we could talk all day.
I know.
Dang.
Well, of course, I'll have you on again because I think these are really helpful conversations, and I have personally loved talking with you. I was going to add just a little tip that I've found when arguing with my daughter, but then anything that you'd like to add about anything.
Oh, please do. Yeah.
It's just that.
Please, I got a 13-year-old. I could use it. Please help.
Well, it's something that I'm learning to do more regularly, but when I'm in conflict, especially with my daughter, but I also sometimes remember to do it with my husband. I release all of the pathological bonds, and I do it very overtly. And that, I mean, not in front of them. I usually separate myself
Yeah.
because I need to breathe, and I don't do it when I'm feeling in conflict as well. So I go into my safe space, which is like my room, a room, my office, something. And I just physically take my hands and I brush them across my body, and I put them all of those bonds into the earth. And I do that across my whole body. I put them into the earth. Some people like to cut cords. I do not choose to do that because I think when I cut a cord, that leaves the other person feeling lost, especially if it's my daughter. But I put it into the earth so it can ground those cords, but it also frees me of that bond. And every time I've done that, especially with reference to conflict with my daughter, within, I don't know, a half an hour or so, everything's good. Our relationship, it's almost like it didn't even happen in some ways. And so when we have a conflict, which isn't very often, but when we do, it's like a red flag to me. Okay, clear those bonds because they get stagnant. They get
because you're
funky.
taking that moment to not like make it about what's wrong. You're taking that moment to make it about what is needed. Like, but you're doing it energetically. That's beautiful.
Well,
I just want to add for a moment, because it's not that I was an angel in my relationship. There are times where Robin didn't respond to my needs for her to give me what I needed at that moment. And I'm going, she's not, paying attention to me and blah, blah, blah. And I had to deal with my own ish. And that helped me a lot too. But there's a difference between neglect and not wanting to engage in your negativity. You know what I mean? Like, where she was, it's not neglect. They're going, I don't care about you. I'm just gonna, you're, and it's not manipulation of, oh, you're in a bad mood, you're just a bitch, like, it's not that kind of neglect or abuse about my emotions. There were just times where, Lauren, I don't know what the heck you're going through. I'm just gonna have to sit back here. And I'm sorry if I'm not acknowledging it. I just don't know what to do. You're in this mess of emotions and I don't know how to fix it. I tried. I tried my best and I had to deal with it.
Yeah, I've had that type of response as well, where it's like, and there's no way he can understand what I'm going through, because it's just too many things at this point in time that are female related. It's like he absolutely doesn't get, women or girls for that matter. That's a part of his life path, I think. But so we did not talk about resources and things like that I typically add to show notes. However, I have some things that I think might be helpful to add. And Lauren, if there are things that you want to send me after the fact in terms of things you either had thought about or think might be helpful to this conversation or things we're working on, I'll add those to the show notes too. And for those of you who joined us after I posted Lauren's information, it's up there in the comments, but also I'll add that to the show notes, including a link to her upcoming Body of Light program, because seriously, personal testimonial that it was the door opening to a significant and positive life change. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. And so, yes, with 2 minutes left, any closing thoughts before we say goodbye for now?
I just want to thank you. I think that you're doing amazing work. I think that you are just a light. Where you shine is shining the light on others, but you also have this glow about you that gives people a really strong position to be themselves. And I really want to thank you for that. And I hope that you keep doing it.
Thank you. That was super kind, and I really appreciate that. And I'm focusing on receiving this, right? Where I used to block compliments, it's like, receive it, soak it up. So thank you very much. Yes. And same to you. I saw somebody say you are a shining light. You look like a glowing goddess. I think that was. Oh my gosh. I thought that was a really cool comment, as many of them are. For those, I will go back through all of the comments at the end of the show, and then show notes will be posted later this afternoon. The replay, which will not include all the introductory materials, will be posted either today or tomorrow. And thanks again, Lauren. And I'm already looking to you'll be on the show whenever that happens.
Yay! All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Bye.